All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Fichter, and I work for the Career Development Center here at St. Joe's. Welcome to the Living and Working in New York panel. So today we have three young alums here with us that have lived and worked in New York for varying amounts of time over the past decade or so. And they'll be sharing their experiences with finding jobs in New York, finding apartments in New York, and really taking advantage, how they've taken advantage of what the city has to offer day to day. So first, I'm just going to start by introducing them. So first, we have Jake Kerrigan. If you want to give a wave, Jake. Jake graduated in 2016 and he majored in accounting and finance. And he's currently a licensed real estate person for Compass. Jillian Roberts. She graduated in 2010. She majored in marketing and she is currently a project manager for 21st Century Fox. And then finally, Audrey Carroll. She graduated in 2015, majored in accounting, and is a senior accountant at Peloton Interactive. So I'd like to thank each of you for being here today, and we're going to kick off the panel. So students, as questions come up, just enter them into the chat box, and then at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll answer all of your questions. All right, so why don't we begin by having each panelist tell us a little bit about themselves and what influenced your decision to move to New York. Jake, do you want to start?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. I'm Jake. I graduated from St. Joe's in 2016, so 4 years ago. I'm from New York. I'm from Long Island. So that was my big influencing decision of coming back to New York. My family's from here. My grandparents moved here from Ireland. My grandfather still lives on 88th Street on the Upper East Side. And now I just live a couple of blocks away from him. But that was my goal at St. Joe's. I said, well, I don't know what I want to do, but I know that I want to be in New York City when all is said and done. And, with the help of the Career Development Center, I can talk some more about that later, but it worked out and I ended up here.
Awesome. Go ahead, Jillian.
Hi, I'm Jillian Roberts. I don't think I'm a young alumni anymore, Danielle, because I graduated
You're
10
still
years
young.
ago. I don't feel it. So I graduated in 2010. I moved to New York shortly after graduation. I was actually recruited by a family friend. So we can talk more about recruiters, but yeah, and I moved. I always want to live in New York. I was actually born there. My parents lived there for like 18 years. So we moved to the suburbs and then, yeah, just wanted to go back. So lived in many different places as you do in New York. You move quite a bit. But yeah, it's just the best place in the world.
Awesome. Okay, go ahead, Audrey.
Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey. I graduated in 2015, and similar to both Jake and Jillian, I grew up in Connecticut, so New York was kind of always the city that we went to, and I just remember going in on the weekends all the time, and so it was always kind of a dream for me to move back and be there and work there. So definitely, once I graduated from St. Joe's, I knew New York was where I wanted to be. But, yeah.
Awesome. Audrey, do you want to get into how you landed your job in New York and the resources that you used to find that opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. So since graduating, I've actually worked for two different companies. I first started my career at a Big Four accounting firm called Ernst& Young, and I know EY recruits heavily from St. Joe, so that's kind of, I use the career fair and those resources to kind of get my foot in the door with EY. And I worked with them for about 2.5 years. And I initially worked in the Connecticut office right after school and lived in the city and like did a reverse commute out to the suburbs for a little bit. And then I ended up transferring into their New York office. And then made the switch over to Peloton, and I actually ended up getting a LinkedIn message from a recruiter. So don't ever doubt that tool. And they reached out saying Peloton was hiring, and I acted upon it and ended up joining Peloton, and I've been there for about 2.5 years. But yeah, it kind of landed that job all through just networking on LinkedIn and, communicating with different recruiters about what I was interested in. And so yeah, that's kind of how I landed that job at Peloton.
Perfect. Jillian, can you tell us about how you landed your job and the resources that you used?
Sure. So right after college, I got a job. I graduated in 2010, so it was like kind of the end of the recession, and things were just starting to pick up, but it wasn't a great time to graduate and find a job, to be honest. Which probably would be the same for this. I'm sure a lot of people think that as well, 2020. But yeah, I graduated and I got a job at an experiential marketing firm called Octagon Marketing, which was actually in Connecticut, but I traveled quite a bit for it. And then I had a family friend who was a recruiter, who I actually saw weirdly at like a funeral, which sounds very bleak, but it's all about networking, and networking never ends. And she got me a job at BlackRock, which is a big financial asset manager. And I had a recruiter that I was working with because I decided I kind of wanted to find something else. And she kept me in mind over the years, and I was able to get a job with 21st Century Fox for her. So it's like always just keeping in touch. I mean, every couple months I would just I still do, just send an email to recruiters, be like, hey, just following up, how are you doing? Thinking about this, and this, let me know if you have anything in mind, if you want to grab coffee. So I have 2 recruiters that I'm like constantly in contact with. Even just this morning, somebody just sent me an email. So it's like kind of good to just kind of keep the open air of communication, because you never know what's going to pop up.
Great. Jake, go ahead.
Yeah. So I majored in accounting and finance. And if any of you listening are doing that as well, God bless you. I know it's it's a tough go. And so I, through the Career Development Center, applied, just like Audrey, to all of the big 4 accounting firms and some smaller ones as well. And I actually, at a Career Development Center event, met a guy who worked at PwC, one of the big 4 accounting firms in New York City. And I latched onto this guy. And I asked him for a lot of advice. He was happy to give it. And he kind of helped me go through all the hoops and do the whole process. And I ended up getting a job at PwC in New York. What's funny is that I lived with a bunch of other finance and accounting guys. We lived in Lafarge, then Ashwood, and then we lived in Overbrook Courts, right behind Lafarge in that neighborhood over there. And we all ended up getting jobs at PwC in New York City. So we all moved to New York City together, and we lived together for 4 years in New York working at PwC. Recently, we've all kind of gone our separate ways. I think COVID has sparked a lot of that for everyone. But it was great. During my time at PwC, I think I realized that accounting was not for me. And so I jumped into what I consider to be the exact opposite of accounting, which is being a real estate agent. And it's been great. I think I've got some knowledge about New York City that we can talk about a little later, and help you all, once you eventually nail down that job, just about how to get here.
Perfect. Oh, I thought I heard somebody with a question. So obviously networking played a part in how each of you got your jobs. How did you start to establish a professional network once you were working? So you have that job, and how did you maintain that and grow that through your career? Jake, do you want to start?
Sure, absolutely. LinkedIn is definitely the easiest way, right? I'm connected with so many people, a lot of St. Joe's people, pretty much every St. Joe's person in New York I'm connected to in some way on LinkedIn. But that's never enough. I think the face-to-face, being at events, is definitely the best way to form a genuine connection with someone. It's one thing to throw, a bunch of messages to people on LinkedIn and hope something comes out of it. but it's another thing to have been in front of someone physically, which I know is not so easy right now. Um, but it's always good to establish as many connections as you can in as many different forms as possible.
Absolutely. Jillian, do you want to talk about that too? And I know you've had a lot of connection to the SJU alumni group that's up there. So maybe if you want to touch on that too.
Sure. So, yeah, I graduated a while ago, and I think maybe there was a little bit of lapse in who was handling alumni events in New York at the time. So my friends and I started just doing like happy hours for people that graduated 2010 and then 2011, 2012. And it kind of grew into like, we had over 100 people at one thing. So I guess it got the eye of Tom Monahan, who was previously at St. Joe's in the alumni office. And he got me on board to help start doing events for New York alumni. So about 3 years ago, I joined the New York alumni chapter and just helped plan events. I was the co-chair. So it's just kind of like finding ways to engage alumni because New York is so big. So it's kind of important to just connect people and get them out to a happy hour or to a Knicks game or something like that. So that's how it started. But then during it, we'd have like people talk about, oh, you're in finance. Oh, I have someone who works there too. I mean, that's just what happens being an adult. Like you just start talking about, what do you do? Where do you work? Oh, I know someone who works there. Oh, somebody's looking at that. So that's been really, really great to kind of see like the St. Joe's network kind of evolve, especially over the last 10 years, because there was nothing when I moved up here. And now there's like, 100 people at each event that we go to. But we're always looking to get more people involved.
Yeah, that's an awesome resource. Audrey, can you talk about your networking experience?
Yeah, so I echo everything that Jillian and Jake said, but I think something that I personally I think has worked really well for me is two things actually: participating in your company's events, trying to meet more people within your organization that you maybe don't work with on a normal day-to-day basis. So at Peloton, they do, a really great job of trying to put on events, whether it's for a different heritage month or even just different themes. Within the year, they'll try to put on an event, and I think just going to those and trying to connect with people that are outside of, the accounting and finance team has been really great to just really broaden my network. But another thing is find something that interests you. So, for me, I really like running. And so in New York, there's all these different clubs and activities that you can join. So I joined a running club, and, a few days a week we'll meet and go for group runs. And that has really given me the opportunity to meet and connect with people that are, so different than me or work in a totally different field, and just getting to really connect. And I think, to the point that was made earlier, there's always people that are like, oh, my company's hiring, or, I know someone who works in finance at this company. And it's just a really great and different way to meet people and while doing something that you personally enjoy too. So I know I have a lot of friends that have joined different kind of club teams or like Zog Sports, which is like a young professionals team where you can play softball, volleyball. So if any of that kind of interests you, I think that has been something I've really found to be helpful.
Yeah, Audrey, I started my own soccer team like probably 9 years ago, and actually like have become such close friends. A couple of them, my soccer teammates, went to my wedding last year. So that's been so fun because it's like it's once a week, you go play, whether you win or lose, you still go out for drinks after. Like usually other friends meet up. It's just my favorite part of it. It's so fun. It's always in different parts of the city, so you get to see different skylines. But on your note about at like my different companies, they always have different affinity groups. So if there's like an ally group that you could join for like LGBTQ people, you don't have to identify as that, but you could just show up and they would do happy hours, and that was a way to meet people. And also like a women's happy hour coffee, I just met people that I never would have before, and it's a free drink or free coffee or whatever, and you just show up and then it kind of turns into that. So just always take advantage of events, or if your company's sponsoring something, I mean, you never know what's going to happen, and worst comes to worst, you get free food.
Nice. I think what you both have said has really made me think that and realize how important networking is, especially if you want to move to New York. after going to St. Joe's. I would say that it's a little tougher, just because in New York City specifically, St. Joe's isn't that household name that everyone knows in the Philly area. In fact, there's a college on Long
St.
Island.
John's.
There's St. John's, yeah, the other SJU, and then there's also St. Joseph's College.
Mhm.
So when I go around New York and I tell people where I went to school, if you say St. Joe's, they're like, really? You go to the commuter school for graduate students on Long Island? I'm like, no, I went to St. Joseph's University in Philly, which is always fun to clarify. But whereas in Philly, and the St. Joe's network in Philly is so strong, everyone knows, yeah, you went to St. Joe's. That's great. You're probably a very smart person, personable, and very capable. I think we're making big strides here in New York. As Jillian had said, the alumni network is definitely growing and also growing more active. And we're really trying to get as many of you up here to New York as we can and really continue to establish that St. Joe's name up here.
How can students connect with that group ahead of time, like if they are interested in moving to New York?
They're NYC Hawks, I believe, is at NYC Hawks. Let me get it real quick. I have it.
Yeah, I think we could
at sju.edu. I'll put it in the chat. But yeah, we have a lot of people who that's kind of like the email goes to the committee. So there's like 15 people. So there'll definitely be somebody to answer it. So you could be a part of like planning committee where you meet once a month. You have a call now and kind of just decide kind of the next steps for events or service event or happy hour, or, it's a little bit more difficult now, but we did just do like a Chelsea Piers night because they have COVID safety in place. But yeah, or you can just show up to events as well. But it's a good way to kind of email us and we can make sure that you get on the email list so you're a part of all the events that get sent out.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about living in New York and finding apartments. So I just want to hear from each of you the advice that you have for students when they're looking for their first apartment in New York, and maybe like what are some of the neighborhoods that you would recommend, that sort of thing. So Audrey, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're lucky to have Jake on this panel for sure, being in real estate. But one thing that, I've kind of had to think about, over the past few years when moving around is figuring out kind of what's important to me, whether, being a young professional, you're kind of working with a budget and, everyone knows New York City is expensive. So for me, it was kind of figuring out what do I prioritize the most, maybe a certain location, or is there a certain amenity that I really need in my apartment, laundry, dishwasher, whatever that might be, kind of figuring out what's important to you because, at least I've noticed that I've kind of had to, there's a trade-off there. So if I wanted to live maybe in the West Village or the East Village, a lot of those apartments are older, walk-ups. So you might be walking up 5 or 6 flight of stairs. They probably don't have amenities like laundry or dishwasher. So I think kind of figuring out, what you really prioritize, whether it's being close to work, maybe figuring out if that, where your office is and if you want to live near there so you can walk. So for me, I've lived all over. When I first moved, I lived in Fidei in a 1-bedroom converted into 2. We had amenities like dishwasher and laundry and a gym, which was nice. And I liked Fidei being kind of so central to so many subways. And I think that was important to me too, was being near a bunch of subway lines that I could easily get to different parts of the city pretty quickly. But then after living in Fidei, I moved to Greenwich Village in a walk-up apartment where I didn't have anything. I had the tiniest space. I had no dishwasher, no laundry even in the building. And so for me, I prioritized location at that point. I wanted to be somewhere where, there was a ton of good restaurants and coffee shops and, a lot of things that really interest me. I wanted to be right there in the middle of it. So I kind of I sacrificed not having some of those amenities. So I think, figuring out you're gonna be the most comfortable with and the happiest with, I think is my biggest advice there.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just to clarify, FIDI, is that the financial district?
Sorry, yeah, that New
Perfect.
York abbreviates everything. So once you get there, you'll kind of start realizing what some of the abbreviations are. But yeah, financial district, which is the very bottom of Manhattan.
Perfect. Okay. Jillian or Jake, either one of you can jump in here.
I'll let Jake finish because he's the expert.
Yeah.
I also have lived all over. I lived in Gramercy for a while, which I loved because I was able to walk to the East Village and walk to Union Square and Madison Square Park. And, that's where my friends and I went out a lot. I did have a lot of friends who moved to Brooklyn in the last couple of years because it was cheaper, but now Brooklyn's not cheaper. So, I mean, it's just always like changing. In the past, I never used a real estate agent. Sorry, Jake. I did, I always looked on Listings Project, which always has great options for sublets or for people who need to break their lease. That's like a weekly newsletter that comes out every week. And then leasebreak.com, I also always looked at. Again, people are breaking their lease and it costs a lot of money to do that. So if they can just hand off their lease to you, that would work. But yeah, it's just like location was really important to me. I eventually moved to the Upper West Side, like near Lincoln Center, which I love because
Nice.
near every subway, which is so important to me. The A, B, C, D, and the 1. So like that can take you literally anywhere, any borough, anywhere. I could go up to the Yankees game in 20 minutes. I could go down the FIDI in like 30. So that was great for me. And I could walk to Central Park and walk to work. So yeah, it definitely becomes after a while, like, what's going to be like the best, use of your time. Like when you can walk home, you can stop here, you could pick up your laundry, you can, all of that. So yeah, it takes a little getting used to, but I would recommend maybe picking someplace close to work at first, and then you can kind of figure out what FIDI means, what Soho, what NoHo, what Nomad, what all these like, Nolita, what this all means. And then you can kind of decide where you want to live, there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then give
A
us
lot of good stuff.
advice.
I think my biggest piece of advice, especially from people just graduating school, wanting to move to a pretty expensive place to live like New York City, the biggest objective I think for all of you would be to get your costs down as low as possible. And the easiest way to do that is to find people to live with, find other roommates, which I know can be tough. I was very fortunate. Somehow, all my friends, we all ended up moving to New York. So I had that built in system. But there's plenty of resources, a lot of websites, a lot of companies dedicated to just helping people find roommates, even random roommates, and like kind of you take a bunch of quizzes and they match you up with people they think you're most compatible with. But it's the easiest way to get your costs down, because if you think about it like this: if you wanted to live by yourself in New York City, you would have to live in a 1-bedroom, or more likely a studio apartment, which is just an open room, an open space. The cheapest places to get those in Manhattan, where people want to live, is like Upper East Side. The financial district's another big one. And they're going to cost you between $1,800 to $2,000 a month. If you scale up, if you go to a 2-bedroom, you can get those right now on the Upper East Side, $2,600, $2,800. So right there, if you're splitting that $2,600, $2,800, your monthly rent expense is going to go down from the $2,000 studio to you're each paying $1,400. And also, when you have a roommate and you get these apartments that are a little bit bigger, they're also a little bit nicer. Like the $1,800 studios and the $2,000 studios are usually pretty old. Dishwashers are rare, let alone like elevators and laundry and stuff like that. But that is definitely the easiest way to get your costs down.
I'm glad you brought that up. Jillian, can you talk about how you found your roommates in New York, if you had any?
Yeah, I did. Now I have a husband, so I get to split my rent. So that's always good. It's like built-in roommate. Yeah, actually I don't even know if this is around anymore. It was roommatematch.com. I was like about to move to New York, and it was almost like a dating site for roommates. So it was like you filled out 100 different questions, and then every day you get an email that's like 89% match. So I met two girls that I lived with for a while, and then I needed a sublet for a little bit for like 6 months before I moved in with a friend from St. Joe's. And I actually went on Craigslist and found someone who just needed a sublet for 6 months. And so that was it. I mean, it's always different. But yeah, that was my experience.
Okay, thanks. And how about you, Audrey?
Yeah, so when I first moved to New York, I actually lived with a high school friend. But then after a year, she moved somewhere else, and I wanted to stay kind of in the area that we were. So I, at the time, didn't actually know what to do with finding a roommate, and I lived by myself. And to Jake's point, I was not saving any money. I was kind of using paycheck to paycheck to cover everything. And so it was definitely, I learned a lot about budgeting and trying to, figure out where my money should be going and what's a priority. But now, so right now I'm not in New York. My lease ended with COVID and working remote. But when I go back, I have had a lot of friends who've had successful roommate searches with Facebook groups. So there's so many different Facebook groups out there that you can kind of post like what you're looking for from a roommate or what location, and other people are on there with the same idea, and you can connect with them. There's an app that I've been on called Roomy, Roomi. And to Jillian's point, it's kind of like a dating app in a way, where like you can make a little profile about yourself, or people who have open rooms in their apartment list their open rooms, and you can kind of search like on a map, like, okay, here are the open rooms, and I can narrow it down like females between the ages of this, or, whatever my preferences are. Um, and I can narrow it down and kind of see what open rooms are available. So kind of playing around on that app has been really, interesting to me to see what's out there. And there's a lot out there right now. People are coming and going. So there's always going to be people who need roommates. And then another thing, to Jillian's point, I've had people who have met roommates on Craigslist. So I never thought about using Craigslist for something like that, but there are definitely people out there. So just look and use these networking relationships that you're going to build, ask around if anybody needs a roommate, or but it's tough when people's leases are all kind of on different schedules. So if you do have friends that you're trying to link up with, and maybe their lease schedule doesn't align to when you want to move to the city, look for a sublet or some sort of temp situation to, until you can align with what a friend's schedule would be. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, and I wish I knew or explored some of them more when I was kind of in that situation where I needed to find a new roommate. But I'm definitely going to use them going forward.
Yeah, the Facebook group, my cousin and my friend have both used Gypsy Housing on Facebook. And that's like, obviously I don't really use Facebook that much anymore, but it's like a good way that like you can see that somebody's a normal person and they have friends, and like, you can kind of vouch in that way. But Gypsy Housing is a good resource.
Cool. Thanks for all those resources. That's awesome. So what are some like challenges that you guys had when you first moved to New York, and what are some of like the classic rookie mistakes that people should be aware of?
Taking a cab, take the
ahead,
subway.
Jillian.
It's always faster. Just take the subway. You think that you want to take the cab, but that's for when you're 30 and you have money. When I was 20, I was like, oh, just take a cab. It's faster, and it's never faster. Take a bus, take the subway. It's $2.75. You'll get there so quickly, especially if you need to like go across town. Yeah.
That's good advice. How about you, Jake? Anything that people should look out for?
Yes, and it relates to real estate agents. If you are moving to New York City for the first time, do not pay a broker fee, which is kind of counterintuitive to my whole profession to be saying that. But there are so many options in New York City. There are so many buildings. And yes, there are millions of people trying to move here every year. So you think that the competition is high, but there are buildings that want qualified people to move in and pay rent every month, like nice St. Joe's students who just got a nice corporate job. They would love that. So what they do is the buildings, will pay me to help you. So we get to be on the same team. No one owes anyone any money. And you can tap into my knowledge and I can get you placed in a nice building. Now, these buildings are going to kind of be cookie cutter apartments in big buildings, but it's a great way to kind of move to New York, make sure that you like it. And then once you live here for a little bit, figure out what neighborhoods you like and what you really want in an apartment. Then you find those like diamond in the rough apartments. And those always come with a broker fee. Even the apartment that I live in right now, a broker, paid a different broker a broker fee. It's just the way it goes.
Real quick, Jake, what the broker fee is, and maybe like how students can find those buildings that you talked about at first that don't require a broker fee?
Absolutely. So the go-to website for all New York City real estate is streeteasy.com. And again, it's kind of weird for me to be saying that because they are almost like phasing out the whole need for brokers, but not really. But streeteasy.com is where you can go on, you type in what you're looking for and you see what's available. It's a marketplace. It's a great way to also do some research and see, can I really afford to live here in this neighborhood if my company pays me this? I saw a question down here in the chat that said, someone was like, you guys live on the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side in these neighborhoods when you're just starting your job? And the answer is yes. Despite, what you see on $1 Million Listing and just stuff about New York, yes, there are super wealthy areas of the Upper West Side, of the Upper East Side, of every neighborhood in Brooklyn, Tribeca, Greenwich Village. But there's also very affordable options as well. So don't be discouraged about that.
And the broker fee, Jake, that's the payment that you make to the, if you could explain that.
So it's a little complicated, but basically if you're a landlord in New York, right, you own this building, there are these big, massive buildings, but there's also like buildings that are owned by like a family, that have like 7 or 8 units. And so they don't really know how to market their building, get these apartments out, bringing qualified renters. So that's why real estate agents exist. We have got that whole process down. And the landlords come to us, they say, hey, I've got these vacant apartments. Can you find a renter for them? We say, sure. Then we have a conversation with the landlord. We say, are you going to pay me or should the person who's coming in pay for my service? And so when the market is really good and the market is really hot, the tenant, the person moving in, would also have to pay the broker fee. But right now, given this entire COVID situation that I know all of us are dealing with, you should never pay a broker fee in any situation. But even in a good market, there's always options that are no broker fee. And what that means is that the landlord is actually paying the broker to do all of the work, not you, the fresh graduate who's moving to New York for the first time. And that is kind of how it should be. But just given that New York is one of the most popular places to live in the world, if people are willing to pay that fee, then landlords are like, great, go for it.
Jake, have you heard of NewYorkBits.com? That's what I used a lot. And it was like it's no fee. The buildings just put their available apartments on, and they obviously have brokers who work for them. Yeah. But they directly put the apartments that are available on this website. So it's no fee, and you can just go through that and you can apply through through their building website, and then you'll meet the broker when you show up, but there's no fee for you. The building pays a broker. So like that was how I found one of my apartments, was nybits.com. And it was like way cheaper than any of my friends ever did.
Yep, that's definitely a good resource. The only thing I would say about New York Bits is that, you know, the only way that they get the updated listings on there is if the owners take the time and update their pages, which,
Right.
you know, is kind of a crapshoot sometimes. StreetEasy.com, everything is validated, everything is, you know, true. I mean, whether or not the pictures always represent exactly what you're going to see, that can be a little dicey. But you know that if you see an apartment on StreetEasy, it exists, and that it's there, and that's the price you're going to be paying.
Cool. That's great advice. Audrey, do you want to wrap us up with this part? Is there anything you would add as far as like challenges or mistakes that you've made or you've seen others make?
Yeah, I'll go down a little bit of a different path, but like, don't overestimate, how much space you have in your apartment. I came with a carload of stuff and then got to my apartment and was like, where do I put all of this? Like space is tight in New York, and so your kitchen cabinets, you might not have as many as your parents' home, or even some of the apartments that are at St. Joe's. And I mean, you guys you're used to living in apartments now, or maybe dorms, which were small and shared. So just kind of think about when you're packing and you're moving, the size of your furniture, or, make sure you measure. I remember I bought a couch and it didn't fit through the door. And I was like, okay, I can't return this. And I had to find a way to move it somewhere else and then get a couch that fit. So just kind of being scrappy with, how you store things, and get creative, like hang things on the wall. Pots and pans have little holes in the handles, hang them on the wall, like then you free up an entire cabinet space. So I think just for me, it was, getting creative with how to organize a closet or how to utilize all the space that you have. But also just being smart about like what I'm bringing into this apartment, size of things, or, do I really need all of these sweatshirts? I'm probably not going to wear any of them. So just really being mindful about, what you're packing and what you're buying to put into that apartment. So yeah, don't buy couches without measuring.
Yeah.
Great advice. Okay, cool. So what advice do you guys have for students just as far as navigating the city? I know, Jillian, you mentioned, utilize the subway. So anything you guys can add to that? Are there apps that are really helpful? Jake or Audrey, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go
ahead,
New
Jake.
York, you're just there's always going to be, there's a million different ways to get from one point to another. And things come and go. There was this scooter company called Revel, where you could literally hop on like a moped that you just leave on the side of the road in a parking space and you drive it. But as people found out quickly, the New York City traffic and way of driving is pretty aggressive, so it was super dangerous, and they shut that down pretty quick. It's back now, but you have to literally like take a safety course and everything. It's kind of funny. I'm a big user of it. Just as a real estate agent, I'm flying around the city every day, so I use it a lot to get from point A to point B.
Jillian,
and
go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just gonna kind of echo on that. Once I did become kind of familiar with, the streets and, to get from point A to B, I really liked using city bikes, which is, they have them in Philly, I think, under a different name, but it's essentially just a public bike and they're all over the city. They have these docking stations, and, you pay $3 or whatever, the same price as the subway basically, and they have memberships, and you literally just can take the bike out and then park it wherever you are in the city. And I think for me that made navigating really easy, especially when the subway lines weren't going in the direction of where I needed to go. I wasn't going just up and down, or I needed to get across town, so maybe the bike was a better option for whatever that travel was. And then also when I first started, understanding the subways took me a while. There's so many different ones. I've ended up in Brooklyn when I didn't want to be in Brooklyn. You go down the stairs and you swipe your card into the subway to realize it's the wrong direction than where you need to go uptown, and this subway line is only downtown. And then you wasted a fare because you walked down the wrong stairwell. So I used an app called City Mapper. I don't have it anymore, and I'm assuming it still exists, but otherwise there's going to be something else out there. But it's basically an app where you put in, your starting location and your ending location, and it tells you what subway lines to take that's going to be the fastest or easiest way, where you have to walk, which side of the street to enter the subway station on, so like, this is the one that's going in the direction that I need to go. And it also tells you get in a car on the subway more towards the front or more towards the back, because then when you arrive at your destination, you're getting out a stairwell that spits you in the street intersection that you need to be. So I found that app was really helpful until I really got my bearings as to, which subway lines get me from point A to B, and, which direction I want to be traveling. Is it uptown or downtown? So I use that app for a really long time. And it also tells you if any subways are delayed, which for me at first, I was like, oh, a subway's going to get me somewhere so quick. I didn't budget in any extra travel time into my like morning commutes to work, but there are subway delays and it happens. And, apps like this will kind of warn you, the 6 train up to Midtown is running delayed, or there was some sort of, mechanical issue and now that line isn't even running. Take a different line. So for me, that was really helpful to kind of, understand the whole subway system.
Yeah, that sounds super useful. Jillian, do you have anything to add, or else I'm going to switch to our final segment here?
Yeah, I'll just say City Bike's great. I've had membership for, I don't know, even when they came out 5 years, but a lot of times your company, if you work at a bigger company, maybe even smaller companies have it, discounts or free memberships for 6 months. I've definitely taken advantage of that because it's like $150 for the year, but I used it so often. I'm always running late in the morning, so I use it to get to work and then I'd walk home. So it worked out easier. And then, especially at the beginning, but in New York, you're never in your apartment, which is why people in New York will settle for such a small apartment with no amenities, because you're just out and about. Like you're out getting happy hour, you're meeting friends. Obviously Broadway's not there right now, but you have a concert or you're, going to dinner or whatever. I mean, you're just always out and about and walking around. So I would just say Google happy hours to take advantage of saving money. There's a bunch of like Thrillist and Time Out have that. But like when you can, just like leave a little bit earlier and walk, because you'll just like always walk down a new part of the street that you've never seen, or notice a new building. I mean, I'm still doing that in my neighborhood now. So yeah, it's so great.
Awesome. Okay, so I want to switch over to the Q&A just because it seems like we do have a bunch of questions that came in, and I want to make sure we can answer them all. So Trisha, do you want to manage the Q&A there? So this is Trisha. She also works in the Career Development Center. She's going to be helping us out with this.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much to our panelists. That was amazing. So we do have some more questions. Some we've covered. So if I skip over your question, I think we already kind of hit some of these in our answers. But if everybody could just go around and maybe just share their absolute favorite part, just maybe shortly, about what their favorite part about living in New York is. If anybody wants to start.
Always something to do. There's like always something, even now, like there's still, they've gotten so really creative with like, the outdoor seating and heaters and tents and bands playing, and there's just always something going on. You're always going to pass by something and be like, what is that? So yeah, just take advantage. It's just like alive.
Yeah, my answer is the same as Jillian. It's, the energy of the city. Even right now, during one of the craziest things we've ever experienced, the energy is still there. And I just like how diverse it is and how cultured it is. You can find food from every single, culture around the world. And there's just so much to learn and to experience. I really like the energy and then just the diversity of the city.
Yeah, this is a good question, Trisha, because I think we've been talking a lot about some of the pain points of living in New York, but the reason that people put up with it is because, in my mind, it really is one of the greatest places to live. I wake up every day, I have no idea what is going to happen, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to eat, who I'm going to meet. It's different every single day. And it's really exciting and really refreshing. And that's why a lot of people want to live here. And listen, I know all of you're in college right now during a pandemic. I know it's got to be extremely difficult. And you're worrying about, yes, I want to move to New York. Yeah, it sounds great, all this stuff. I want to be able to get around, but how do I get there? And it's tough. I know the pandemic is definitely putting a damper on things, but you know, we should try and find some things in it where you can kind of look at it as an opportunity. Someone had told me earlier that because of the pandemic, you can kind of use it as an opportunity. You could get hired by a company that isn't necessarily located in New York, but you could have an agreement where you could work remotely, as most people are right now, and still live in New York. So that I thought was a super interesting idea and a super good point that I think a lot of you should think about as well.
Absolutely. And that was actually one of the other questions. So Audrey or Jillian, I don't know if you want to jump in terms of pandemic and COVID about kind of the atmosphere change or any of the big changes that are going on in the city because of that right now. And do you think it's kind of slowly coming back to life almost?
Yeah, I mean, on Saturday, I have dinner with 6 other friends in New York at an outdoor place. And then we're going to see like an outdoor concert. And then Sunday morning, I'm going to brunch with friends. Like, yeah, it's obviously changed. And for a couple months, like the rest of the world, it was in lockdown. But it was so nice in May when things started opening back up and you got to see like your favorite bartender, your favorite mom and pop shop open back up. So it's not dead. It's safe, it's fine, it's great. It's like, you know, it's slowly coming back. So it's just trying to like support the places that you want to stay open.
Yeah, and all these places are getting really creative with how they can continue operating, during this. And I think you also need to get creative too with, finding new ways to hang out with your friends and something that is safe but still, social. And I think taking advantage of New York and being outdoors and doing maybe some of the touristy things that you put off and didn't do before, go walk over the Brooklyn Bridge. It's a free activity and it's really fun and really cool. And then you go get a slice of pizza over in Brooklyn and come back. And, there's so many things you can do right now that you just have to get creative with how you do them. But I think there's so many parks and so many just different places to still be social and hang out with your friends, but in, a safe way. So yeah, lots to do right now.
Good to hear. Just kind of switching gears. One of the questions was asking more about your job specifically, and did you guys have any internships while you were in college, and kind of just talking about how you found those internship opportunities. So if anybody wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I think, internships are the key. At least they were when I graduated. But it's that way to get your foot in the door. In fact, I had an internship with a different accounting firm than the one I ended up at, which, just goes to show you that, even if you intern somewhere, it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily have to work for them or something like that. But it's a great way to stay connected. Listen, we all love New York and want to end up here. It's going to take a little bit of an extra effort. Just you being here and listening to this for the last hour shows that I think you're all equipped to do that and ready to do that. But it's going to take an extra effort. And what I did that worked for me is right from the beginning. I sat down in, I forget the name of the building, but it was right across from Ashwood. And I had an interview there through the Career Development Center with an accounting recruiter. And I said, hey, I know you work in the Philly office. I love Philly. It's been great for the last 4 years, but I really want to be in New York. How can you help me make that happen? And they, right from the get-go, they said, okay, they flagged me, like, this kid wants to work in New York. So just make it known from the get-go. It's going to take a little bit extra to get here, but it's definitely worth it.
Before we started, Joe McDonald, who I think is on the call, who works in the Career Development Center, helps with all that. He mentioned like sending in your resume blindly just off a website is not going to really make you stand out. So like Jake just said, like, try to go to the Career Development Center or try and talk to someone from there and just say, like, that's my goal. I want to move to New York. Do you know of any companies that are having internships, this or that? Because that's what it is. Just asking someone that could just open a door for you. It's like, that's just the way to do it, is like finding someone who has a foot in the door. Recruiters as well. I have a list of them that I've been working with, but I just Googled recruiters, honestly, in New York, and like maybe the job that I was looking for. So it's really just kind of using, because companies hire recruiters or companies are working with colleges. And that's, if somebody from St. Joe's or somebody from the recruiter has a connection and they're like, hey, here's a great candidate. Here's someone who's a good, like a hard worker. They'll send it, it'll get right to the top versus, just sending it on the website where it's just going to be like in the bottom and no one's ever going to see it, unfortunately.
All right. There's a couple questions here specifically for Jillian. So I'm going to hold off on those just for a second. There's another question here about seeing family, friends. So can you guys talk kind of about work-life balance and living in New York City, or just specifically with your careers in general, if anybody wants to tackle that?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So I think one thing that is so great with New York is the transportation systems. So for me, growing up in Connecticut and my family being in Connecticut, there's a train line that goes right from, Midtown Manhattan right to Connecticut. And I'm fortunate enough that I live in a town where the train line is, but it takes you really pretty far into Connecticut. And I know it's easy. There's the same type of transportation systems going from New York to Long Island, or New York or the city to New Jersey, and you can easily get back to Philly. Being in New York, a lot of my friends were still in Philly, so I would constantly take buses from Manhattan right down to Center City, Philly, to go visit friends. So yeah, I went to go back home and went to Connecticut to see family quite often, or they would come in and visit too, and we would do a day in the city together. So yeah, I had no problems ever, making time to go see family on the weekends, or you leave on a Friday and you catch the bus or the train back to the suburbs and you spend the weekend. And it was really, really easy, I think, just with the great transportation that New York has.
Yeah, I did take New Jersey Transit to New Jersey, and it was 20 minutes from my mom's. And if you book Amtrak like a month or two in advance, it's like $35 to get back to Philly if that's where you need to go. Closer to, it's like $135, which I'm not even going to pay now, and I make more money than I did 10 years ago. But yeah, it's really easy to get in and out. Like Audrey said, there's like train lines, there's buses, there's everything.
I'm just thinking of like random bits of information, just an idea that popped into my head. But I knew I wanted to live in New York, and I knew at the time, just from being here, that it really takes like some roommates to be able to make it happen and make it cheap. And I really didn't know anyone else that wanted to live in New York. So the guys that I ended up living with, were just my friends at St. Joe's. And, one day I was just like, guys, would you ever want to live in New York? Wouldn't it be kind of cool to live there after school? And obviously, that everyone had been thinking about it, but it never really became a conversation. And then just from that conversation, we kind of tackled the whole task of getting a job and moving there as like a team sport. And it was really great. So you really don't have to be alone in it. There are a lot of people, especially at SJU, that want to move to New York. You may just not know it. Look around in this, this group right now. There's a bunch of 25 participants. There's people right there who want to move to New York, who you have some common ground with. So just start some conversations with people.
Awesome. And I know we have like 2 minutes left, but really quickly, if everybody could just go around and answer this. I love this last question. We can kind of end here on a really positive note. Someone asked, what's something that really great happened to you after you graduated that maybe you weren't expecting, or a really great surprise, or just something good that happened to you, maybe as a result of moving to New York? Everybody could quickly just share one quick thing.
I've got one off the top of my head. At St. Joe's, I really thought that I needed to have all the answers. Like I needed to have a plan for my whole life of what I was going to do, because now was the time to start lining it all up. And so, studied accounting, studied finance. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that. I'm going to move to New York. And this is going to be it. But when I got here, I loved New York, but my job, I was like, damn, I really don't like this. Did I just sign up for this for 40 more years? Like, can I go back? Like, what do I do? And the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to have it all figured out right now. It's great that you want to move to New York. That's kind of the thing that was my driving factor. But once you move here, even the first job that you take doesn't mean that you're going to be in that role for the rest of your life. And it's important to know that there's plenty of flexibility. Everyone changes all the time. And it's very easy. So don't put that pressure on yourself.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the greatest things about New York, or something that's happened to me was just meeting really great people and some of my new, like, more recent best friends, and just, really great friendships that have been formed. So when I moved to New York, my St. Joe's roommates and my really good group of St. Joe's friends weren't in New York. Most of them were in Philly or elsewhere in New Jersey. So I kind of had to not start over in a way, but really kind of get out there and really try to make new friends and find other ways to make friends as an adult, which is not always easy. But I've met some really great lifelong friends that I would have never have met them if it wasn't for being in New York, and doing these different kind of networking activities outside of work, like this run club, or even like a book club, or going to workout classes, and just kind of picking up a conversation with somebody. I've just made some really great lifelong friends that would have never happened if I wasn't in New York. So
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I felt like lonely when I first moved here because I didn't know that many people, but it was like from joining soccer and meeting people at work, and just like having them in my life now. I mean, one of my friends that I met at work got married in Italy, and I got to go last year. Like, I would never have gotten to go to Lake Como, to this beautiful wedding, if that, like, I just think of things like that. But yeah, New York is just great. Just things are always popping up, and I wouldn't change anything. It's just been such like a great experience.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Trisha, for managing the questions. So after this is over, I will follow up with you guys with the email address for the Hawks in New York, the alumni group. And then I'm also going to share Jillian's contact info for those of you that had questions specifically for her. And then if any of you are interested in meeting with a counselor from the Career Development Center, we have drop-ins Monday through Friday from 1 to 3:45. They're just 10 to 15-minute conversations with a counselor. You're always welcome to come here to do that. Everything is socially distanced, or you can schedule an appointment online for a longer amount of time through Handshake. So I just want to thank everyone for attending today. We hope you enjoyed hearing from our panelists. I know I did. You guys had a lot of great information for everybody. And I just want to thank the panelists again for joining us. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you all.